A very good evening, everyone. We'll be starting in a few minutes. While we're waiting, I'd love for you to just type in which country you're from in the chat. So go ahead and type into the chat, where are you from? Bolivia, Alex, Guyana, Panama, Bolivia, Peru, Trinidad and Tobago, Nigeria. Someone coming in from Toronto, Canada. Nigeria, Bolivia, Ecuador, Guyana, Guatemala, El Salvador, Panama. Fantastic. Mumbai. Okay, it must be pretty late over there. El Salvador, La Paz, Bolivia, Nigeria as well. Great to see you. I see we've got Carl from Haiti, Ramila from Mauritius. Hi, Didi in Panama. Okay, wonderful. So let's get started for today. And we're going to be doing an Ask Me Anything session, as you might know, and we're going to go through 3 different topics. So one is we're going to do an overview of the Accelerator Labs. We'll talk a little bit about how they work, what is some of the work that those Accelerator Labs do. We'll talk about the roles. So the 3 roles that we're hiring for in the 30 countries for the Accelerator Labs. You'll get the chance to find out a little bit more about them and meet some of the people who are behind these roles in other Accelerator Labs. And then finally, we'll talk about your questions, right? So you'll have a chance to ask questions and get some answers. This, of course, being an Ask Me Anything session. Now, we have a number of people with us today in this panel that's going to be speaking with you. We have Gina Lucarelli. She is a team leader for the Accelerator Labs network, but really that title, I think, undersells her a little bit. Gina leads all of the work globally around the Accelerator Labs. There's myself. I'll be moderating the AMA session. I also work as an advisor with UNDP. We've got Emily Chakavarica. She is a human resource advisor with UNDP, so she'll be able to help answer some of your HR questions. We have Juan David Martin Jimenez. He is the head of experimentation at the Columbia Accelerator Lab. So we have a real live Accelerator Lab team member with us. We also have Paulina Jimenez, no relation to Juan David, who's the head of solutions mapping in Ecuador. And of course, we have Nicola Simpson, who's the head of exploration in Barbados. So that's a little bit about who we have with us today in the session. Now, if you have questions, what I'm going to ask you to do is to use the Q&A button on Zoom. So if you look at the bottom, you'll see that there is on your panel a Q&A button. That's a great place to ask questions. The chat we'll just use to kind of have conversations, but for Q&A and questions that you'd like to get answered when we get to the section on Q&A, we'll be going through that Q&A panel. And you can go ahead and kind of vote up the questions that you're most interested in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand this over to Gina, who's going to tell us a little bit about the Accelerator Labs. Go ahead, Gina.
Thanks so much, Cal. And thanks to all of you for joining us here this evening or wherever you are, whatever time zone you're in. So just to give you a little bit of a sense of what this network of lab is, and within the global organization that is the UN Development Program, let me kick this off. Hang on a second. There we go. All right, so UNDP, the UN Development Program, is an organization within the United Nations, working a lot on reducing poverty, reducing inequalities of many forms, and protecting the planet. It's a large organization present in 170 countries, territories around the world, has about $5 billion in delivery every year, and about 17,000 staff and consultants that make up the UN Development Program. Largely, our mission at the UN Development Program is to support the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals and the promises made at the Paris Climate Summit. Now, the Accelerator Labs are a new service offering for the UN Development Program. So what we're doing here is building on the expertise we have in biodiversity and the rule of law and gender equality and other areas related to sustainable development. We're bringing in a new service offering that is meant to reimagine development for the 21st century. We do this because we see a gap emerging in what we understand as sustainable development and the tools we use to achieve that, and the accelerated pace of change that there is in the world today. Essentially, the UNDP Accelerator Labs offer, in this new service offering, they diversify the kinds of solutions that we put on the table for development challenges. They also take a portfolio approach so that we're trying to get closer to systems transformation. We see sustainable development as a complex adaptive system, which means no one person is in charge. There are multiple actors. Things are changing all the time. The actions you take have sometimes unknown consequences. So we really need to learn more about operating within that and making impact on a system. And then we're also diversifying our data sources. We're opening up evidence to bring in new forms of data, which can be real-time data or close to real-time data. They can also be citizen-generated data, ethnographic evidence, etc. So essentially, this new service offering that the Accelerator Labs bring has four main components. The first is collective intelligence. So this is quite simply the idea that we are smarter together. It can bring in the use of what you know as crowdsourcing or crowdfunding or new sources of data, digital sources of data. But it helps us kind of get a sense of if we imagine sustainable development is something that's moving and changing all the time because it's affected by the actions of 8 billion people on the planet, how do we start to be much more intelligent collectively? The portfolio of experiments you can hear from our colleagues who are on the call, who are in this role as head of experimentation. What they're doing is trying to bring in play multiple interventions, multiple tests or multiple probes to advance learning on what works and what doesn't in sustainable development. When we talk about solutions mapping, we're talking about looking to the knowledge and inventions and hacks and coping mechanisms of people who are living in poverty and people who are affected by climate change. And then we also use sense making, which acknowledges that traditional strategic planning is ill-equipped to deal with a quickly changing environment. And what we need to do is, rather than designing a plan and delivering that plan, what we need to do is actually continuously make sense of the patterns we see in multiple moving parts around the development and innovation ecosystems. So we are now growing. We now have 60 UNDP Accelerator Labs serving 78 countries. This is because some of the labs have a multi-country portfolio. We'll hear from Nicola in a moment about that. The Caribbean lab based out of Barbados is one such example. We're moving to 90 labs, which will be covering 114 countries. A good portion of these are in Africa, almost half of them. And by the time we have completed this expansion, we'll be reaching the majority of the small island developing states and the majority of low-income countries. We just started last year, 2019, we launched, but we were really excited to get an award, an early days award. The UNDP Accelerator Labs won Global Public Service Team of the Year from Apolitical in the category of evidence-based policy, which is exciting to us because we're really excited about bringing those new forms of evidence to complement the expertise that is driven from technical evidence of economists and statisticians, to complement that with new forms of evidence. So just to offer a few examples, and then we're going to open it up for Q&A of the kinds of work that is happening. We can hear more from Paulina, our head of solutions mapping in Ecuador, about this in a moment. And it's early days. I think they're just kicking this off, but it's really exciting. They are using satellite imagery to find cattle farmers who are able to farm cattle without contributing to deforestation. So that's an exciting endeavor that's out there. In Zimbabwe, the team is really working on the informal economy, and with over 70% of jobs in Zimbabwe generated from the informal economy, the Accelerator Lab was able to flip, in a way, how the UN Development Program and its partners see the informal economy. So normally it's something that is, we need to regulate, we need to register. What if we were to start to see the informal economy as a feature and not a bug of the Zimbabwe economy? What kind of opportunities would that open up? And then finally, in the era of the pandemic that we are all living through at the moment, we're pretty amazed to see the agile capability of the Accelerator Lab network to pivot to this very constantly changing environment. One great example is the Accelerator Lab team in Sudan, which is using behavioral insights to get a better understanding of panic buying or binge consumption patterns, so that we can understand this impact on the supply chain and take a stab at that system level impact. So the roles that you have seen advertised are the first three here on your screen. Head of solution is someone with usually with an ethnographic, sociological, field research background, somebody who can better connect the UN Development Program to the people we serve and to their knowledge. The head of exploration is sort of looking ahead, doing some horizon scanning, trying to understand alternate futures that are possible, and bringing in new sources of data. The head of experimentation takes this intelligence from the head of solutions mapping and the head of exploration and turns it into a portfolio of probes and tests that help us learn what works and what doesn't. All of these roles are based in the UN Development Program country office in each of the countries where the labs are. And so they work hand in hand with the development experts within the UN Development Program, bringing in this social innovation expertise. So that's it from me. Let's hear from you guys and open it up.
Wonderful. So thanks, Gina. We have a couple of questions. So again, you'll want to use the Q&A feature, which is right here at the bottom of your Zoom, to ask questions. And let's take a look. So Khadija asks, good evening. This is Khadija from Guyana. I noticed the postings recently were for the head positions. Would there be postings for team members required to assist the heads in the coming days? Who'd like to take that?
I can take that if you like.
Go ahead.
Hang on, my internet says it's unstable. Okay, there will not be posting for team members required to assist the heads in the coming days. When we call these positions heads of exploration, we're asking them to pool together partners and current staff of the UN Development Program to be a team of explorers, experimenters, and solutions mappers. So we are not advertising for additional positions below the heads of.
Fantastic. And Juan David, did you want to add to that? Okay, let's head over to our next question. Vanessa, you typed in, I have something that says I have 3 questions, but I have not seen what those questions are. So you might want to try typing those in again. Let's take a look. Romila asks, do you work with communities, NGOs, or with governments?
Maybe Nicola, you want to take that one?
Sure. So good evening, good morning, everyone from Barbados. I'm Nicola, the head of exploration for the lab. And yes, in our context in Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean, we do work with all of those. We primarily work first with governments. I mean, a big part of what we do is supporting them as they try to develop sustainably. So for example, in our case, our lab has a focus on the blue economy. How do we sustainably use the ocean and its resources? So in that case, we work with the ministry under the government that is responsible for that. We work with other partners such as non-governmental organizations, and a lot of what we try to do is engagement at the grassroots community level. And I think that's a big part of the labs as well. How can we brainstorm with grassroots people and find innovative solutions at their level and reach people that UNDP does not traditionally reach? So I think I can speak on behalf of the Barbados and Eastern Caribbean lab, but I know for many of the other labs, we are working not only with government, NGOs, civil society organizations, but also with private sector. And that's someone that we're starting to try to engage with more.
Wonderful, thanks. Anyone else from the labs want to speak to that? Shall we head to the next question? All right, Juan David, I will pass the next question over to you from Fatima Diaz, which is in Spanish.
So, hello everybody. Here is Juan David from Colombia and Space. So Fatima is asking how many people work at the lab. One person with a year of work experience, for example, management of satellite data can work at the lab. How is it to work in the lab? So I answer in English, right? Yes.
It might be good to answer in both languages, actually.
Okay. So first in English, we are 3 persons at the lab. So that was what Gina was explaining. There are 3 roles, and we work as a team, but we aim to work with everyone at the office. So depending on the project, we are forming this unusual kind of teams with the different projects inside the office. And with that, we're trying to build a big team of teams. So the lab has only three roles, but we have different projects that we collaborate with more people. Can a person of 1 year of experience work in the lab? Yes, as they told us when we were applying, it's about how you can contribute to the team, not necessarily how much time of work do you have. So I believe if you have a year of work, it works for the labs. And how is it to work in the labs? I guess you can see in Paulina, Nicola, and my face, we're happy to be here, to be collaborating, and more than our jobs, and I think it's been a great experience. And in Spanish, En el laboratorio trabajamos tres personas, son 3 roles, pero con cada proyecto que estamos trabajando podemos hacer una vinculación con diferentes personas en la oficina, con diferentes proyectos. Entonces, dependiendo de la temática, estamos los 3 roles y las diferentes personas de los proyectos. Entonces, es una forma en la que estamos buscando que el trabajo del laboratorio sea lo más horizontal posible dentro de la oficina y que el laboratorio esté trabajando para y con la oficina en los diferentes retos. Para el tipo de experiencia laboral se busca que apliquen personas que puedan tener 1 año, 2 años, 3 años, es indiferente, es como el aporte que pueda tener la persona dentro del equipo. ¿Y qué tal es trabajar en el laboratorio? Estaba diciendo que aquí nos pueden ver la cara a Paulina, a Nicola y a mí, que estamos felices ya después de un tiempo de trabajar en los laboratorios y de estar aquí pudiéndoles dar una guía y poder respondiendo sus preguntas.
Thanks very much. Okay, so Vanessa asks, is there an age limit to apply? I don't see one, but it seems intended for young people. That's one. 2 is, in the requirements, you asked us to present a portfolio. Could you give us an example of what a portfolio can be for, let's say, a sociologist that has done research with her organization? That's collective research, not individual research. So maybe we'll go over to Emily for the first question on the age limit. All right, that's maybe we'll head then to the second question on the portfolio.
Sorry,
anyone want to speak to
I
that?
don't know if you can hear me. Sorry.
Yes, Emily, we can hear you.
All right. Okay. I was just saying that there's no age limit per se, because we follow our recruitment policy. As long as the person is qualified and has, meets the requirements of the post and demonstrates that capacity and the zeal that is the job description. Because when you read the job description, they require a certain personality, a go-getter, like Gina was saying. So according to our recruitment policy, we can hire anybody who is qualified and with the appropriate age limit, but we can't hire anyone who is close to retirement a year before you are retiring. So up to the age of, let's say, 64, you can still be hired. We can, our retirement age in UNDP is 65 years, as long as you meet the requirements. There's one thing I wanted also to clarify in terms of the requirement of 4 years strictly enforced. I mean, our job description, when we advertised them, they were very clear. It's NOB according to the country office standards. So at least you require a master's degree plus 2 years of experience, or a bachelor's degree plus 4 years of experience. But according to what was highlighted earlier on, their exceptions, depending on the labor market of the specific country and what we are looking for. So this is what I wanted to clarify. And then the next, I think this is it for HR right now, right?
Sure, that's good.
Yeah.
Does anyone want to speak to the idea of what a portfolio might look like, especially if you're doing teamwork?
Sure, maybe just to jump in here, Cal. So I don't think the job application asks for a portfolio, and maybe unless it's a specific requirement that you saw in a specific country. I think what you might be referring to is this, what we talk about when we talk about a portfolio approach, which means that we, when we look at innovation, we don't look to one single innovation as a solution or as a unicorn, as a panacea for all, for complex sustainable development problems. We look rather at a series of different kinds of experiments. They might be technological, they might be behavioral, they might be regulatory experiments. So that's usually what we mean when we talk about a portfolio.
Fantastic, thanks.
Okay, thanks, Jenna. Can I just come in on the way, what would be the time commitment for the role, the location of work, and the remuneration?
Go ahead.
Okay, so the time commitment, the UNDP offices, it's like you'll be located in the particular country office you are applying to, and each country office has got its work hours. They range between 37.5 hours to 40 hours per week, and normally it's 8 to 4 in some country offices, or 8 to 5 depending on the week. So it's a full-time position, And then in terms of the remuneration, it's according to the salary scales that is set per duty station. So the country office in particular will be able to share with you the salary, and the salary is pegged per candidate based on their level of experience up to a certain maximum. So we have a very good compensation structure where we come with leave days and there are other benefits and entitlement, a contributory pension scheme, medical insurance, and the like. So it's a very good compensation package that is available.
Wonderful. Thanks, Emily. Kimberly asks, can you expand on the multi-country labs and how they would differ from a single country lab? Maybe we'll send that over to our colleagues in Barbados.
Yes, so for example, in Barbados, we are based in Barbados, but we cover 9 other countries, so 10 countries in total within the Eastern Caribbean. So that's how it is different to many of the other labs. So not only in the Caribbean, but also in the Pacific. So instead of covering just one country, we're covering a range of countries. So in our case, the Eastern Caribbean. And this presents many opportunities, but also challenges. And currently right now during COVID, we can't travel. So we can't get to those countries. So we're having to innovate to see, how we can continue our work on the ground. But it also presents a great learning experience to share within the countries as well. So that is how it differs. Instead of just one country, it's 10 countries in our case, for example.
Thanks.
Does that make sense? Or do you all wish me to elaborate a bit more? Or maybe you can chat and I can answer privately if anything.
Yeah, let's take any other follow-on questions. Let's do them through the chat. That sounds good. All right. Anna asks if we could provide some details on the selection process and how it works. Emily, would you like to speak to that?
The selection process, like I was just highlighting, after the advertisement is done, we are going to have a team that is going to look into the shortlisting of candidates who meet the requirements of the job posting that was put forward. In addition, we'll work with Gina and Lucas, the team that is supporting the Accelerator Labs. So they have put together a very comprehensive recruitment strategy that is going to include a written test, right? And then there's going to be video interviews, and it's going to be a very innovative way of looking at this, and we're going to involve our country offices as well in terms of assessing candidates. So we've got very good assessment methods that are going to measure the candidates' technical skills, and as well as the functional competences that we are looking into, and thereafter then a decision will be made. So it's a very comprehensive recruitment strategy which has got stages that are all lined up to make sure that we get the best candidate.
Thanks, Emily. And how many stages are there in the recruitment process?
I would say for now, I could identify 3 stages that are very clear, because we are going to have that video interview, right? And we are going to administer some written tests in some cases, and there could be some follow-up interviews. I don't know, Gina and Lucas, you can add on this, but this is what I gathered that we are going to work with for now. This is very clear. We could add some more assessment methods depending on the candidates that we find, so that we make sure that we are getting the right candidate.
Yes, exactly. Largely, there's three steps to this. Yes. One is a review of the CVs that are submitted, and that narrows down the list to see the candidates who meet the requirements of the job. The second, if you pass that stage, then you may go on to the video assessment that Emily talked about, which is a remote thing that you do on your time. And if you pass that, you'd be invited to an interview. Possibly digitally or possibly in person, depending on the lockdown situation in your country at that time. I would just say, maybe just to the candidates, be patient with us. Yeah. We try and move quickly with these recruitments, but there are many steps in the process. So I understand that's frustrating, and it's something we're really always trying to improve on. But do be patient, because it could be you apply and you don't hear back for a while. We do try and keep this moving, but because there's so many applicants, for example, we the first 60 labs, we had over 8,000 applicants. These are all CVs that need to be reviewed in detail by different team members around the world. So things
take time. And just, a follow-up on that is Imran asks whether the shortlisting is done by a centralized network of accelerator labs or by a country office.
So I can take that one too. Yeah. Emily, you can take it if you like, or I can take it.
No, go ahead, Gina, it's fine.
Okay, just to say, it's a combination.
Yeah.
So essentially, because we now have real live people like Juan David, Nicola, and Paulina in these roles, we're going to tap on them to help us with the selection process. I will also be involved, as will others, innovation experts inside UNDP and sometimes outside UNDP. But fundamentally, then the UNDP country office plays the lead role in making the final decision.
Yeah, fantastic. My goodness, we have 71 open questions. So you folks are doing a fantastic job asking us questions. I'm going to go to actually another question from Zimran, who asks, in terms of social innovation, experimentation, and design thinking, there are a number of established methods and approaches, as well as tools. Are the UNDP Accelerator Labs using a specific process or curriculum for experimentation? And can you tell us a little bit about it? Any of the Accelerator Lab team members want to tell us about it?
I could answer part of that. I'm a designer, and I started using design thinking when it began the whole trend of using design thinking. So there are tools and there are methodologies that we are including inside the toolkit of the lab, but I believe it's more understanding and using the tools with a purpose, not exactly as a methodology as it was, as we can understand that the 4 phases or whatever phases different methodologies have. So we do use the tools, but we have our own tools and methodologies that are working towards understanding the problems and working with problems. So that's a good approach of the labs on. And we should work on understanding and framing the problem and building a portfolio of solutions to the problem. So it's not necessarily design thinking. There's a very nice model that Bas Lear, as part of the global team, has designed, in which design thinking is part. But we have to understand that we need to design the tools for the specific task.
Fantastic. Luis asks, Luis from Guatemala asks, what kind of experience linked with education are you looking for? Is it open or what kind of experience is it? And he'd like to hear about what are some of the profiles of the actual team members, so you folks right now. And perhaps we'll start with Paulina. Tell us a little bit about your profile.
Sure. I'm a sociologist, and I have a diversity of background experience. I have done a lot of militant research, which is also, I think it's been very useful to do research action. And I've worked, for example, in the health sector. I've done a lot of policy design, but with indigenous communities. So I think I've always been looking at the exceptions, working with populations that are more vulnerable and trying to find how, the general policy doesn't fit for all, but goes, into the looking for the specifics. So that's more or less my background, coming from the social movements and the academia and a little bit of the public policy.
Brilliant. Nicola?
Yes, apologies, my dogs are barking. I am actually a marine biologist and a natural resource manager, someone that loves the sea. And that's the background where I studied. I worked with government before this. I also worked with the private sector, and I also worked with a lot of non-governmental organizations. So I think that this role brought all of those together and allowed me to continue to do that. And also having done a lot of research and analyzing of data, for example, being and having that scientific background, I think that's really helped me. But as I said, having, a degree is one thing, and having the experience working and volunteering with non-governmental groups, or being in the fish market, for example, in Barbados, has also really helped me, just like Paulina said, to connect with people on the ground, those that may be most vulnerable, etc. So that's a bit of my background.
Wonderful. And Juan David, did you want to add anything? You told us a little bit about your background, but did you want to say anything more?
Yeah, I'm a designer by training. Then I did a master in strategic design. And yeah, that's my background on studying.
Super. Andrea Odell asks, who do the heads of exploration, solutions mapping, and experimentation report to in the country office?
In our case, we report to the deputy representative. It's not the case of all labs, but that gives us quite a direct line with the representation.
Across the labs, the heads should report either to the resident representative, which is the senior manager in each UNDP country office, or as Paulina said, the deputy resident representative, who's the number 2.
Anna asks, are there already identified topics for the projects in new countries that the lab members would have to work on? And if so, in Peru, what would these be? And then we had another person who asked about the length of a project. So how long, when the Accelerator Lab engages in some kind of project, how long is that?
Anyone want to take that? I'm happy to, or Juan, David, you take it?
Yeah. Well, part of the initial process is to identify which is going to be your main goal. And through the main goal, there is a learning cycle, which is 4 phases. That's part of the methodology we use at the labs. So identifying that goal, we're going to make several loops to understand and how we can reach the main and the moonshot challenge that we have. But it depends in every country. So in Colombia, we chose the last mile, to close the last mile gap. And we are making different experiments and different explorations and understanding different solutions from the community that will help us work with the main challenge. So every country can work and should identify the challenge that they have individually. So I for example, understand and know a little bit about Ecuador. Maybe Paulina can tell the challenge they have.
Yeah, I started with one which is going to be for a longer term, which is youth informality, and then we have a shorter learning cycle. So we work with projects that maybe we dedicate a longer time, and some that maybe we can finish doing the cycle, the learning cycle, in a month or 2. But and that's really interesting because that's part of the dynamics of the lab and trying to bring in some evidence in a very quick basis. So yeah, we're working on that, and we're also working with recycling and some other issues that come along.
Can I just jump in there quickly? I think it's also important to note whichever country you're in, to look at where the national conversation is right now. That's what we did in the case of Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean. So we looked at the national and the regional conversation, what were the biggest challenges, what were governments focusing on, where were there gaps, and that helped us to inform, the focal area or the topic for our lab. So I just wanted to share that as well. And also actually to add to that, it may also be useful, to look at what the country office is doing. So when you get the role, what other programs exist within the country, and how can the lab fit into that, and not only have an impact and integrate within the country office, but also have an impact and integrate with the country at national level with governments.
Fantastic. We have a couple of different questions on what kind of backgrounds are suitable. So, someone asking about the background of a journalist, whether business or private sector experience is an asset in these positions. And Yara asks, could you give us examples of good background in development programming, partnership building, and engagement? Any thoughts on what constitutes a good background for some of these positions?
It's very open and very diverse.
Right. So we have yeah, go ahead, Gina.
All of those are great, just to say.
Yeah, there's incredible diversity in the 180 people that are already in the Accelerator Labs. You've just heard on this call as well. So certainly that's true. Alex asks, the TORs in the website are in Spanish, but the UNDP application browser is in English. Do we apply in Spanish or English?
Maybe Emily, can you take that one? I'm not sure which country that is. We don't know.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, like Gina said, we're not so sure which country it's coming from, but it's if it's a Spanish-speaking country, you can apply in Spanish, and if the language, the business language, the working language that is being used in the country offers, if it's English, then you have to apply in English, and if it's French, you have to apply in French, if you can. But English is acceptable across the board, but depending on the country, the official working language in that particular country, then you can apply in that language.
And just to say, some of the assessment might also include then English interview questions or interactions or written assessments.
Yeah.
Right. Someone asked, do you collaborate with other countries' labs? Do some of our ACLab team members want to talk about that?
Sure, I can start. So for example, the Barbados and Eastern Caribbean Lab currently is trying to collaborate more with other small island developing states labs, so such as those in the Pacific, which although they're extremely far away, we face many of the same challenges and have seen many of the same opportunities. We're also trying to collaborate with many of the other labs. Even though we're English speaking, we're also collaborating with many of the Spanish speaking labs in Latin America and the Caribbean region, in Africa, because we're noticing that around the world there are many of the same challenges and many of the same solutions, and it's something that is really encouraged within the global network. It's an amazing network of people who have diverse backgrounds, as we said, and it's great to learn from them and see how we can work together.
Paulina, did you want to add to that?
No, just very similar. I think one of the very rich experiences from this job is actually having the opportunity to exchange a lot of doubts and learnings with the whole network, and we have a lot of channels to communicate that, and it really works well. I think we get to know each other's work very closely, and it really helps because there's a lot of expertise within the team.
Fantastic. Juan David, do you want to read us out the next question?
Sure. So it says, ¿qué piensan de una arquitecta que tiene 5 años de experiencia en el sector público, municipalidad específicamente, para este tipo de laboratorios? Voy a responder en español y luego la leo en inglés. Teniendo un perfil de arquitecta, yo soy diseñador, son carreras bastante similares. Y, por ejemplo, en mi caso, yo también vengo del sector público. ¿Qué es lo bueno de venir del sector público? El gobierno es el principal aliado de trabajo del PNUD y de Naciones Unidas. Entonces, el tener conocimiento de cómo trabaja el sector público es un gran atributo para generarle valor al laboratorio y al trabajo que se puede hacer con gobierno. So now it goes in English. The question goes, what do you think of an architect that has 5 years of experience in the public sector, in a municipality specifically? The answer is architecture and design are pretty close related in the education. So it's a good set of skills. Myself, I come from working in government for quite some years. And the good part of working in government and now working in the labs is that we can bring a lot of value and understanding our main ally, meaning the government. So it's a good set of attributes to have being an architect and having worked in government.
Thanks. We have a couple of questions from people asking about nationality. Do you have to be a citizen of the country for the lab that you're applying for? Could you apply to any lab in any country?
Our policies are very clear. For national officer position, you have to be a citizen of that particular country you are applying to. However, we have some offices that are multi-country offices where the labs will be supporting a number of country offices around. So in this case, we'll be guided by the local labor laws, whether the national officer will be able to work in that particular country. We clarified with the lab network, Agina, and the team. They said that even if it's a multi-country, all the candidates or the staff members are supposed to be located in one location. So we are also going to be guided by the local conditions there, whether the government allows individuals from those specific countries that are covered to work and stay in the country office where the res rep and all the managers are based.
Wonderful. Veronica asks, how do you measure your outcomes at the lab? Gina.
Sure, thanks, Veronica. So we've given this a lot of thought, and I'd definitely say that what success looks like evolves as we learn more and more. To me, I look for three specific things when defining a successful lab. Are they diversifying how we understand problems and solutions? Is an important one for us. Are they targeting decision makers? So what we want to see from here is that innovation is not for innovation's sake because it's new and it's hype and it's interesting, but rather it influences policy decisions about human or financial resources. That's what we want to see. And we also want to see a bit of a embedding and spreading of the way we work in accelerator labs, either with national partners, with governments, with private sector. So it's really important that we start to see this take up among the partners of things like tapping into collective intelligence to understand a country's situation vis-a-vis the COVID-19 pandemic, for example. So those would be my three.
Thanks. And what I've just done is I've pasted into the chat an article from the Accelerator Labs Medium that talks a little bit about some of the current thinking on how to measure success. If you want to learn more about the Accelerator Labs and some of the thinking that is happening around them, I really strongly suggest that you read through the Medium page. Lots of great articles that give you a concrete idea of really what's been happening there. We have a couple of questions around timeline. So someone asked, if they can apply once they finish their degree in fall of 2020. Another person that said, given the current COVID situation, what does the timeline look like for hiring? Anything we can say on that?
Maybe I can take that one because I'm the most monitored on the timeline. So these labs need to be set up by the end of summer, which means that we would expect interviews to be happening as soon as July. And we would hope that candidates could start either by the end of August or beginning of September. That would be the timeline we're looking at.
Fantastic. Paula asks, why is there so much advertisement about these job opportunities? I'm a bit afraid that this will be very competitive to join.
It might. They're really amazing jobs. Honestly, I'm sorry that I don't have one of these jobs because it's an incredible role. They're really beautifully designed and there's a lot of leeway. I think you could probably, take some of these colleagues for a coffee and hear the harder part, the more difficult, the ugly bits of the story. But largely, this lab network means that the UN is embracing social innovation at scale, and there's a lot of leeway and creativity in how we do that.
Fantastic. I'm just having a look through some of the questions. There's a question from Nadzea who asks, what's the start end date of the lab?
So these labs will be running from 2020 through 2022. The positions are for you. If you're successful, you would be awarded a 1-year contract, which would be extended, would be likely extended based on performance and other issues at the end of the year. But the labs themselves are 3-year projects.
Fantastic. If you're still in process of obtaining your master's degree or you're doing your master's thesis, are you still eligible to apply? Emily, do you want to take that?
Yeah, if you're doing your master's thesis, but you know, because we advertise the position with experience needed, when you hold a master's, it's 2 years experience. When you've got a bachelor's, it is at least 4 years of relevant work experience as per job description. So if you have this kind of experience, you can still apply based on the advert that was sent out. So actually we are looking at, like we were saying, this is a very competitive process. We are looking for candidates who fairly meet the requirements of the position. So depending on where you are, if you meet the requirements and you're interested and you've got the relevant experience, then you can apply. Either a bachelor's plus 4 years of experience or a master's plus 2 years of experience.
Thanks. Raul asks if for the Accelerator Labs, after experimenting, if they find some kind of solution that fits to solve a problem, what happens to it? You know, does UNDP finance it? Are there investors that are brought in? What happens after that?
That sounds like a lab question. Paulina?
Okay, I think it's really important to work with partnerships. So before having this design and coming up with this solution, I think it's important to on the way, when you're designing your prototype or your solution, that you involve partners that can later adopt this, because the lab will not implement. Probably there's not going to be budget for that, but it's important that there's a buy-in, maybe from the government or maybe from the private sector. So the partnership aspect is very important that you work on, so that, especially if you're going to contribute to development with one of those solutions.
Thanks. Carl asks, I understand that your key allies are in the public sector. Do you focus more on local rather than central governments? What can you tell us from last year's experience?
I believe it depends on the challenge that you're working specifically, and also the country that you're based in. I'm from Colombia, so in Colombia there's a lot of work in territories, not only in the city. Actually, Bogota, probably as it has more access to development, has of course a lot of challenges, but most of the challenges are located in other departments of the country. So it really depends on the challenge and how your country works.
And while we're with you, Juan David, Anna asks, does the head of experimentation position involve a lot of field work or traveling, or is that taken mainly by the solutions mapping side of the lab?
It's for the whole lab. I mean, we have 3 roles, but trying to put yourself into a silo, meaning you do solution mapping and you do exploration and then there's experimentation, it wouldn't work, because it's not like a linear process. We can see it and you're gonna probably see it as linear, but it definitely goes, you are going to the field, you can be in the field and understand with a solution mapper and already kind of have some hypothesis of how you can make an experiment. So I believe the work is for the 3 roles to be in the field, and it's going to be different if you just see the information probably in a diagram and post-its that your colleagues bring. You have to be with them on the field. That would be my take on the field work.
Fantastic. Paulina, do you want to read us out the next question?
Sure. Sorry about that. There's a question in Spanish. Okay, so I'm going to, is it that one that you want me
Yes.
to read? Okay, just a sec. So the question is, cada uno de ustedes tiene un equipo de trabajo. Por ejemplo, ¿trabajan con consultores independientes o solamente con las personas con las que trabajan en los laboratorios y otros colaboradores del PNUD? Entonces, I'm going to answer in Spanish first. Sí, principalmente el equipo de trabajo consiste de las tres cabezas y de hecho, por ejemplo, en el caso del laboratorio de Ecuador, nosotras nos ocupamos incluso de los procesos administrativos. Otras áreas cuentan a veces con asistentes que les pueda apoyar en esos procesos, pero nosotras hemos aprendido, ha sido como un camino arduo, pero ahora ya nos sentimos ágiles con eso. Y el tema de consultores externos, sí se puede realizar algunos trabajos externos, pero siempre, digamos, con el liderazgo del equipo. O sea, no es tanto una delegación, sino un apoyo. Okay, so the question is the team mostly, based on the three heads, or do we have independent consulting people, or other collaborators? So I was saying that basically the team is the three heads. In the case of the Ecuador lab, we do all the administrative work and process. But of course, we do have sometimes, done external consultations, not so much to delegate the work because we do the coordination and we are very involved in the design of the work, but more as an external support. So that, yeah.
Fantastic. So what I'm just going to do is, as we get to the end of this, I'm going to ask each of our Accelerator Lab team members to tell us a little bit about what is their favorite part of being part of the lab networks, right? What's their favorite kind of benefit, I guess you could say, of being part of the Accelerator Labs network in 30 seconds or less. And so I'm going to go to Nicola first.
Sure, I think part of what I like most, although it's also a challenge, is that we're helping to break the mold. And we really are doing innovative things that are having a big impact. And although, the labs are only a year old, we're already seeing those impacts. And as I said, it's a diverse group of people, a huge network, and many amazing experiences that we're learning from this.
Thanks. Juan David.
To answer really from a personal side, I believe this work has been for me finding a place that I can see myself fulfilling my purpose. So I'm a designer. Probably for a designer, when I studied design, this was not a common work to do. So I have been able to put together my purpose and my skills and putting them in work for populations and for the labs and for UNDP. So it feels more that we are UNDP family than just the lab family, which is another thing that we love, of being part of this and being able to collaborate with the whole office and with the whole 60 labs when we can talk to them. That's weekly.
Brilliant. Paulina.
In my case, I'd say that it's a very meaningful job. I really appreciate having the opportunity to put all my creativity and my commitment in this job. And one thing that I feel very comfortable with, which it may sound strange, is that I feel very comfortable working with questions and not so much with answers. And it's really amazing to have that opportunity.
Wonderful. Gina, any last words from you?
This is so fantastic. I'm going to get emotional here. This is amazing to hear. For me, my favorite part of it is I feel like this network of people is a reason for optimism in what can sometimes be a pretty dim looking world. When you look at the environmental path we're on and the widening gap between rich and poor, and even just the fact that we're all locked up in our houses because of a pandemic. You meet people in this network, the skills they have, the mission, the sense of mission that they have, and you start to feel like, all right, maybe we're going to take a turn. I love that.
Thank you. So we are looking forward to seeing your applications. You can go back to the Accelerator Labs website and click apply now to find the application for your country. We have a number of other AMA sessions happening. So if you would like for some reason to join another one, you are most welcome to, but you might also want to tell some of your friends about some of these sessions. Maybe some of your friends are interested in applying for a different position, or perhaps in another country where we're hiring. So we would love to have as many people as part of these sessions as possible. I really want to thank you all for the time this morning, evening, afternoon, wherever you might be taking part in this, and for all of your fantastic questions. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks so much, Cal, for expert moderation. See you
Thank
guys.
you.
Good luck.
Bye. Thank you.
Ciao.